London, 1845. The gilded carriage bearing the Sunderland crest rattled along the rain-slicked cobblestones of Mayfair, each jolt reminding Lady Felicity Wentworth of her impending fate. The silk of her travelling dress rustled as she peered through the window at the grey London afternoon, her gloved fingers worrying at the pearl buttons of her sleeve. Tonight, she would meet the man she was to marry, a stranger whose name was all she knew. "We are nearly there, my lady," her maid murmured, noticing the rapid rise and fall of Felicity's chest. "Thank you, Martha," Felicity replied, smoothing her skirts with practiced composure. At 23, she had long resigned herself to a marriage of convenience. Love was a luxury afforded to those who did not bear the burden of a family's salvation on their shoulders. The weight of her father's gambling debts pressed upon her more heavily than the ornate jewels at her throat, a family heirloom that would soon belong to the Duke of Sunderland, along with herself. Lord Wentworth had gambled away his fortune, his estates, and nearly his daughter's future until the Duke had offered a solution: marriage to his heir with full settlement of all debts, a duty born of desperation. That was all this arrangement could ever be. The carriage slowed before an imposing townhouse, its limestone facade gleaming despite the drizzle. Felicity drew a steadying breath, reminding herself of her purpose. She had accepted this fate to save her family from ruin, and she would endure whatever marriage to Lord Nathaniel Sunderland might entail. "Remember your posture, my lady," Martha whispered as footmen approached to assist them. "The Duke is known to value decorum above all else." "I have been preparing for this moment my entire life," Felicity replied, though her voice lacked conviction. In truth, she had been raised to be ornamental, accomplished in watercolors and pianoforte, skilled in the art of conversation without substance. What did she know of being a duchess? The butler received her with precise formality, leading her through cavernous halls adorned with ancestral portraits. Each stern face seemed to judge her worthiness, finding her lacking. The click of her heels against marble echoed her heartbeat, too fast, too fragile. "Lady Felicity Wentworth," the butler announced as she entered the drawing-room. Two men rose at her entrance. The elder, the Duke, she presumed, was silver-haired and austere, his posture rigid even as he bowed. But it was the younger man who captured her attention. Lord Nathaniel Sunderland possessed none of his father's severity. Tall and broad-shouldered, with raven hair and eyes the color of storm clouds, he studied her with an intensity that sent heat rising to her cheeks. His formal bow was graceful, belying his powerful frame. "Lady Felicity," the Duke said, his voice as cold as the marble beneath her feet. "Welcome to Sunderland House. I trust your journey was comfortable." "Quite comfortable, Your Grace." "Thank you for your hospitality." The words fell from her lips with practiced ease, revealing nothing of the turmoil within. "Allow me to present my son, Lord Nathaniel Sunderland, your intended." Nathaniel stepped forward, taking her gloved hand in his. "Lady Felicity," his voice was deep, resonant, "I hope we might become better acquainted before our wedding." His touch lingered a moment longer than propriety dictated, and Felicity felt a curious flutter in her chest. She quickly dismissed it. This marriage was a business arrangement, nothing more. To imagine otherwise would only lead to heartbreak. "I should like that, my lord," she replied, withdrawing her hand. "Though I understand time is of the essence." The Duke nodded approvingly. "The wedding will take place in 3 days. My solicitors have finalized the settlements with your father." His gaze swept over her, assessing. "You will make a suitable duchess, I think. Your mother was from good stock, despite your father's indiscretions." Felicity's spine stiffened at the mention of her father's failings, but she maintained her serene expression. "I am honored by your confidence, Your Grace." "Nathaniel will show you the portrait gallery before dinner," the Duke continued. "I have correspondence to attend to." With a curt nod, he departed, leaving Felicity alone with her future husband. Silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken questions. Nathaniel was the first to break it. "I apologize for my father's bluntness," he said, his expression softening. "He values bloodlines and appearances above all else." "There is no need for apology, my lord. I understand the nature of our arrangement." Something flickered in his eyes, disappointment, perhaps. "And what nature is that, Lady Felicity?" She met his gaze directly. "A mutually beneficial alliance. Your family gains the respectability of my lineage, and mine escapes financial ruin." His lips curved into a half-smile that transformed his features. How refreshingly honest. Most young ladies would pretend romantic notions. "I was not raised to indulge in fantasy, my lord." The words came out more bitterly than she had intended. "No," he said quietly, studying her. "I suspect you were raised to be precisely what you appear to be, the perfect nobleman's daughter. But I wonder who you are beneath that carefully constructed facade." Felicity felt suddenly exposed, as if he could see through the armor she had spent a lifetime forging. "Shall we proceed to the portrait gallery, Lord Nathaniel? I would not wish to keep your father waiting at dinner." He offered his arm, which she took with the proper degree of formality. "As you wish, Lady Felicity. Though I hope one day you might call me simply Nathaniel." As they walked through the corridors of what would soon be her home, Felicity fought to maintain her composure. This man beside her was not what she had expected. There was a warmth to him, an intelligence in his gaze that unsettled her carefully ordered thoughts. It would be dangerous to hope for anything resembling affection in this marriage. Better to remember that duty, not desire, had brought them together. The portrait gallery stretched before them, generations of Sunderlands immortalized in oil and gilt frames. Nathaniel pointed out ancestors of note, a general, a diplomat, a royal confidant, each one bearing the family's characteristic strong jaw and penetrating gaze. "And where will my portrait hang, I wonder?" Felicity mused aloud. "Beside mine, I should think," Nathaniel's voice lowered, "though no painter could truly capture your beauty." She turned to him, startled by the compliment. "You need not flatter me, my lord. The contract is signed. I am already yours." His expression grew serious. "Is that how you see yourself, as property to be transferred? Is that not the essence of marriage for women of my station?" she challenged, then immediately regretted her frankness. "Forgive me, that was improperly spoken." "No," he said, his gaze intense. "I prefer honesty to empty pleasantries, and I would have you know that while our union may begin as a matter of duty, I hope it might grow into something more." Before she could respond, a footman appeared to announce dinner. The moment broken, Nathaniel offered his arm once more, and Felicity accepted it, her thoughts in turmoil. His words had stirred something within her, a dangerous flicker of hope she dared not nurture. The following days passed in a whirlwind of fittings and preparations. Felicity saw little of her betrothed, as protocol and the Duke's rigid schedule kept them apart. The brief glimpses she caught of Nathaniel, conferring with his father, directing servants, once riding in the park at dawn, only deepened her confusion. Who was this man she was to marry? The dutiful heir apparent, or the thoughtful gentleman who had spoken of hope? On the evening before her wedding, as Martha arranged her hair for bed, Felicity confronted the question that had plagued her since arriving at Sunderland House. "Do you believe people like us can ever marry for love, Martha?" The maid's hands paused momentarily. "I believe, my lady, that love can grow in the most unlikely soil, given time and care. Even when the soil is salted with duty and obligation." Perhaps especially then, Martha secured the final pin and stepped back. Sometimes the hardest ground yields the strongest roots. Felicity met her own reflection in the mirror, pale, composed, the perfect image of a bride-to-be. Yet inside, she trembled with uncertainty. Tomorrow she would become the Duchess of Sunderland, bound forever to a man she barely knew. Her wedding day dawned clear and bright, as if the heavens themselves approved of the union. St. George's Church gleamed with candlelight, the pews filled with London's elite, not to celebrate a love match, but to witness the joining of two great families. Standing at the altar beside Nathaniel, Felicity felt strangely calm. She had accepted her fate. The vows she spoke were clear and unwavering, a promise to honor and obey a man whose character remained a mystery. When Nathaniel slipped the ring onto her finger, a Sunderland heirloom of sapphires and diamonds, his touch was gentle, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. For a moment, the church, the guests, even the stern-faced Duke faded away, and there was only this man, this stranger who was now her husband. The wedding breakfast that followed was a lavish display of the Sunderland wealth and influence. Felicity played her role perfectly, accepting congratulations with gracious smiles, conversing with duchesses and countesses as if she had been born to their circle rather than elevated to it through desperation. Only once did her composure falter, when she overheard two dowagers whispering behind their fans. Poor Nathaniel, shackled to the daughter of a gambler. The Duke must be desperate indeed for an heir to the heir. They say Lord Wentworth lost everything at the tables. The girl brought nothing but her bloodline. Felicity felt her cheeks burn, but before she could move away, a warm hand settled at the small of her back. "My Duchess," Nathaniel murmured close to her ear, "I believe we have fulfilled our social obligations. Shall we depart for Sunderland Manor?" Gratitude rushed through her. "Yes, I should like that very much." The journey to the Sunderland country estate passed largely in silence. Felicity watched the London streets give way to rolling countryside, each mile carrying her further from the life she had known. Beside her, Nathaniel seemed lost in thought, occasionally glancing at her with an expression she couldn't decipher. "You need not fear tonight," he said suddenly, breaking the silence. "I understand the nature of our arrangement." Heat flooded Felicity's cheeks at his meaning. "I am aware of my duties as your wife, my lord." Something like frustration crossed his features. "That is not what I meant. I would not have you come to me out of duty alone." The carriage rumbled over a stone bridge, and Felicity used the moment to gather her thoughts. "What would you have of me, then?" His gaze softened. "Honesty. Perhaps, in time, friendship." "And what of an heir?" The question was bold, improper even, but she needed to understand her position. "There will be time enough for that." His voice was gentle. "When we have established trust between us." His consideration both relieved and confused her. This was not how such marriages typically progressed. The husband's rights were absolute, his consideration optional. "You are not what I expected, Lord Nathaniel." A smile tugged at his lips. "Nor you, Lady Felicity." Before she could ask his meaning, the carriage crested a hill, revealing Sunderland Manor in the valley below. The ancestral seat of the duchy was magnificent, a sprawling Georgian mansion of golden stone, surrounded by formal gardens and ancient oaks. "Welcome to your new home," Nathaniel said, watching her reaction. Felicity took in the sight with wonder. Even knowing of the Sunderland wealth, she had not anticipated such grandeur. "It's beautiful." "It has been in my family for 5 generations." Pride colored his voice. "Though it has lacked a duchess's touch for too long. My mother died when I was a child." The personal revelation surprised her. "I'm sorry, I lost my mother young as well." Their eyes met in shared understanding, the first genuine connection between them. The moment ended as the carriage pulled up to the manor's entrance, where a line of servants waited to greet their new mistress. The remainder of the day passed in a flurry of introductions and tour. Felicity's head spun with the names of servants and the layout of seemingly endless rooms. By evening, when she retired to her chambers to prepare for her wedding night, exhaustion had settled deep in her bones. Martha helped her into a nightgown of finest silk and lace, part of her trousseau, hastily assembled once the engagement was announced. "You look beautiful, my lady," Martha said, brushing Felicity's hair until it gleamed in the firelight. "Martha," Felicity began hesitantly, "what do you know of Lord Nathaniel? The servants must talk." The maid's hands stilled. "They speak well of him, my lady, fair to those in his employ, generous with his time and resources. Not like the old duke, who rules with an iron hand." "And is there talk of other women?" The question burned Felicity's throat. "No, my lady, not like that." Martha's eyes met Felicity's in the mirror. "They say he has waited for a marriage of his choosing, that he resisted his father's previous attempts at matchmaking." The information settled uneasily in Felicity's chest. If Nathaniel had indeed been holding out for a love match, how bitter must be his disappointment in their arrangement. "Thank you, Martha. That will be all for tonight." Left alone, Felicity paced her chambers, waiting. The connecting door to Nathaniel's rooms loomed large in her awareness. Would he come to her? Should she go to him? The etiquette of wedding nights was not something her finishing school had covered in detail. A soft knock startled her from her thoughts. The door opened to reveal Nathaniel, dressed in a silk dressing gown, his dark hair free of its usual restraint. "May I enter?" he asked, remaining on the threshold. Felicity nodded, suddenly acutely aware of her state of undress beneath the thin silk robe she wore over her nightgown. Nathaniel closed the door behind him, but made no move to approach her. Instead, he went to the small table where a decanter of brandy waited, pouring 2 glasses. "I thought you might need this," he said, offering her one. "I find I needed it myself." She accepted the glass, their fingers brushing momentarily. "Are you nervous, my lord?" A rueful smile crossed his face. "Is it so obvious? I had thought myself better at concealing my emotions." "Not nervous about?" She gestured vaguely toward the bed. "No," his gaze was steady. "Nervous that I might fail to be the husband you deserve." The admission stunned her. "I don't understand." Nathaniel sipped his brandy, seeming to gather his thoughts. "When my father first proposed this match, I agreed for the same reasons you did: duty, family obligation. But then I saw you, Felicity. I saw your courage, your dignity in the face of circumstances not of your making." He set his glass down and took a step closer. "I find myself wanting more than a marriage of convenience. I want to know the woman behind the perfect manners and composed facade. I want to earn your trust, perhaps even your affection." Felicity's heart hammered against her ribs. "Why would you want such things? You know nothing of me." "I know enough." His voice deepened. "I know you sacrificed your own happiness to save your family. I know you face each challenge with grace and intelligence. I know that when you smiled, truly smiled, at the little flower girl at our wedding, it transformed your entire being." She stared at him, speechless. Had he been watching her so closely? "I am not proposing love at first sight, Felicity," he continued. "Such notions are for novels, but I am proposing the possibility of something genuine growing between us." "And if it doesn't," she whispered, "then we will have a respectful partnership and a comfortable life." He reached out, his fingers hovering near her cheek without touching. "But I believe it might, if you are willing to try." The moment stretched between them, fraught with possibility. Felicity had never allowed herself to hope for anything beyond duty in her marriage. To open herself to the chance of more was terrifying. Yet looking at Nathaniel, at the earnestness in his eyes, the vulnerability in his expression, she found herself wanting to take that risk. "I am willing," she said finally, her voice barely audible. Relief washed over his features. Then, with deliberate slowness, he leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers, a gentle kiss, a promise rather than a demand. When he drew back, Felicity felt something shift within her, like the first crack in a wall of ice. This was not the cold transaction she had prepared herself for. This was something altogether different and infinitely more dangerous to her heart. "Will you come to bed, Nathaniel?" she asked, using his given name for the first time. His smile was answer enough. Later, as moonlight spilled across the tangled sheets, Felicity lay in the circle of Nathaniel's arms, her body still humming with newfound pleasure. He had been gentle, attentive, his every touch designed to bring her joy rather than simply claim his marital right. "What are you thinking?" he murmured, his fingers tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. That you have thoroughly disrupted my expectations, she replied honestly. His chuckle vibrated against her skin, for better or worse. I'm not yet certain. She propped herself up on one elbow to look at him. This tenderness between us, is it real, or merely a pleasant fiction to ease our circumstances? In the silvery light, his expression grew serious. It is as real as we choose to make it, Felicity. I cannot promise that the path will be smooth. We are strangers still, with much to learn of one another, but I can promise that my intentions are genuine. She studied him, searching for deception and finding none. Then I shall endeavor to be worthy of such intentions. You misunderstand, he said, brushing a strand of hair from her face. There is no worthiness to be earned. I wish to know you, your thoughts, your desires, your fears, not some perfect version you believe I expect. The request was so at odds with everything Felicity had been taught that she hardly knew how to respond. From childhood, she had been molded to be what others wanted, obedient daughter, accomplished lady, and now dutiful wife. The thought of being valued for her true self was almost incomprehensible. I'm not certain I know who I am beneath those expectations, she admitted. Nathaniel's smile was tender. Then we shall discover it together. The weeks that followed their wedding night unfolded like the pages of a story Felicity had never dared to imagine. Each day brought new revelations about her husband, his passion for agricultural improvements that benefited tenant farmers, his unexpected skill at the pianoforte, his habit of reading Shakespeare aloud in different voices that made her laugh until tears came. In turn, she cautiously revealed herself, her love of astronomy that her governess had discouraged as unsuitable, her secret ambition to write poetry, her preference for riding astride rather than side saddle when no one was watching. They established rituals unique to them, morning walks through the dew-damp gardens, chess matches by the library fire, reading to each other before bed. Simple pleasures that, woven together, created a tapestry of genuine affection. Not that their harmony was without discord. Their first serious argument came when Felicity discovered Nathaniel had settled her father's remaining gambling debts without consulting her. You had no right, she said, pacing the library where he had been reviewing estate ledgers. Those were not part of our marriage settlement. Your father came to me directly, Nathaniel replied, his calm demeanor only fueling her anger. Would you have had me turn him away? I would have had you discuss it with me first. The volume of her voice surprised even herself. Those debts were incurred after our arrangement was made. He had no claim on your generosity. Nathaniel leaned back in his chair, studying her with a frown. You're not truly angry about the money. Am I not? Then pray tell, husband, what am I angry about? The words came out sharper than intended. You're angry because your father used you again. His insight cut to the heart of the matter. He traded on your new position just as he traded on your marriage prospects before. Felicity turned away, unwilling to let him see the tears that sprang to her eyes. You don't understand. Then help me too. His voice softened as he came to stand behind her, not touching, but close enough that she could feel his warmth. I want to understand, Felicity. He was not always as he is now, she said finally, staring out the window at the gardens beyond. After my mother died, something broke in him. The gambling, the drinking, they were his escape from grief. I keep hoping that if I help him enough, sacrifice enough, the father I remember might return. Nathaniel's hands settled gently on her shoulders. And if he doesn't? How long will you punish yourself for his choices? The question pierced her defenses like an arrow finding its mark. I don't know how to stop, she whispered. He turned her to face him, his expression grave. Your loyalty is admirable, but it cannot come at the expense of your own happiness. You are not responsible for saving him. Then what am I responsible for? The question contained all her doubt, all her uncertainty about her place in the world. Living your own life, he said simply. Finding joy. And perhaps, if you wish it, loving your husband who is trying very hard not to fall hopelessly in love with you. Felicity's breath caught. Nathaniel. Too soon, a rueful smile curved his lips. I told myself I would wait until you were ready to hear such declarations. It seems my patience is not as vast as I believed. She reached up to touch his face, wonder blooming in her chest. I am beginning to think that love is not something one can schedule or plan for. It simply happens, like rain or sunshine, without regard for our carefully ordered lives. Is that your way of saying you might one day return my affection? Hope brightened his eyes. It is my way of saying I already do, she admitted, the truth of it surprising even herself, though I scarcely know what to do with such feelings. His smile was radiant. We shall learn together. The kiss they shared then was different from all that had come before, not tentative exploration or physical desire, but the first true expression of love between them. That night, as they lay entwined in the darkness of their bedchamber, Nathaniel confessed the full truth of their arrangement. I must tell you something, he said, his voice solemn in the darkness. Something about our marriage that you deserve to know. Felicity propped herself up, suddenly alert. What is it? It was I who approached your father, not the other way around. His admission hung in the air between them. When I heard of his financial troubles, I saw an opportunity. She drew back slightly. An opportunity for what? To marry for my own choosing, rather than my father's. His fingers found hers in the darkness. The Duke had been pressing me to offer for Lady Caroline Harlington, a match that would have expanded our northern holdings, but condemned me to a lifetime with a woman I could scarcely tolerate. So I was the lesser of two evils. Felicity couldn't keep the hurt from her voice. No, Nathaniel's response was immediate and firm. You were a mystery, a woman known for her grace and intelligence, who had somehow remained unwed despite numerous offers. I was intrigued before I ever met you. But still, you arranged to purchase me like chattel. The hurt was transforming to anger. I arranged to offer you a choice, he corrected gently. Your father would have married you off to someone eventually. His debts made that inevitable. I merely ensured I was first in line with the most generous terms. Felicity sat up fully, wrapping the sheet around herself. Why tell me this now? After I've begun to trust you, to care for you. Nathaniel sat up as well, his expression pained in the dim light from the banked fire. Because that trust is precious to me. Because I cannot build a true marriage on half-truths, no matter how well-intentioned. She was silent for a long moment, absorbing his words. The revelation should have shattered her newfound happiness, yet strangely, it did not. Instead, it cast their entire courtship in a different light. Not a cold business transaction, but a calculated risk taken by a man desperate to choose his own fate. Did you truly know nothing of me before we met? She asked finally. Only your reputation, accomplished, proper, the perfect nobleman's daughter. His voice held a note of remorse. I did not expect to find such depth beneath that polished exterior. I did not expect to care so quickly, so deeply. Felicity considered his words, weighing them against the weeks they had spent together, the tenderness he had shown her, the respect with which he treated her opinions and desires. I should be furious with you, she said at last. You have every right to be. Yet I find I cannot summon the appropriate outrage. She looked at him, really looked, seeing not just her handsome husband, but a man who had taken an unconventional path to find happiness. Perhaps because, regardless of how we began, what lies between us now is genuine. Relief washed over his features. It is the most genuine thing I have ever known. She reached for his hand. Promise me something, Nathaniel. No more secrets between us, no matter how difficult the truth may be. I promise, he said, bringing her hand to his lips. No more secrets. As spring turned to summer, their bond deepened. Felicity found herself growing into her role as Duchess with unexpected ease. The staff respected her fair-minded approach to household management, and even the formidable Duke seemed to warm to her presence, particularly when she demonstrated a keen understanding of estate matters. It was during this period of domestic contentment that the first shadow fell across their happiness. The London season had begun, and duty required the Duke's presence at court, along with his heir and new daughter-in-law. "Must we go?" Felicity asked as they prepared for bed the night before their departure. "I have grown fond of our life here." Nathaniel smiled indulgently. "It is only for a few weeks. Besides, I thought you might enjoy showing London society that the Wentworth daughter has risen above her circumstances. I care little for their opinions." But even as she spoke, Felicity knew it wasn't entirely true. The whispers about her father's disgrace had wounded her deeply. "Nevertheless, it is our duty." Nathaniel pulled her into his arms. "And I confess, I look forward to dancing with my beautiful wife at Almack's, making every bachelor in London envious of my good fortune." His playful words coaxed a smile from her. "Very well. But promise you'll rescue me if Lady Jersey begins recounting my family's scandals." "I shall be your most devoted knight." He kissed her lightly, "though I suspect you need no rescuing. You faced worse than society gossips and emerged triumphant." The London townhouse felt cold and formal after the warmth of Sunderland Manor. Felicity found herself counting the days until they could return to the country, even as she dutifully attended teas, musicales, and balls. It was at one such event, a soirée hosted by the Marchioness of Westford, that the carefully constructed piece of her new life began to unravel. She was standing near a potted palm, taking a moment's respite from the crush, when she overheard a conversation not meant for her ears. "Have you heard about young Lord Sunderland?" a woman's voice asked, low and conspiratorial. "They say he only married the Wentworth girl because his father discovered his indiscretion with that opera singer." "No," another voice exclaimed with delighted scandal. "I had thought it was merely to save her family from ruin." "That too, of course. But my husband sits on the same club board as the Duke's secretary. He says the old man was furious, threatened to cut Nathaniel off entirely if he didn't end the affair and make a respectable match immediately. So the Duke chose Lady Felicity as punishment." The second voice was gleeful with gossip. "How delicious." "Precisely. A beauty with no fortune and a disgraced name. The perfect comeuppance for a son who dared defy his father's wishes." Felicity stood frozen, each word a dagger to her heart. An opera singer, an affair, a punishment. The story they painted was so at odds with the narrative Nathaniel had shared, yet it explained so much. His initial distance, his father's coldness, the hasty arrangement. She made her way through the crowded ballroom with mechanical grace, her social mask firmly in place despite the turmoil within. Nathaniel was engaged in conversation with a group of gentlemen, laughing at some jest. How handsome he looked, how carefree, while her world collapsed around her. He spotted her approach, and his smile widened, genuine pleasure lighting his eyes at the sight of her. The expression only twisted the knife deeper. Had it all been a performance? The tenderness, the growing affection, the whispered words of love. "Felicity," he greeted, extending his hand to her. "Lord Ashford was just regaling us with tales of his latest hunting expedition." "How fascinating," she replied, her voice sounding distant to her own ears. "I fear I've developed a terrible headache, my lord. Would you mind terribly if we departed early?" Concern immediately replaced his smile. "Of course not. Let me make our excuses." In the carriage, he fussed over her, offering his handkerchief soaked in lavender water for her temples, promising to send for the physician if she worsened. Each solicitous gesture was a mockery of the truth she now suspected. "There's no need," she said, her voice cool. "I'm certain it will pass with rest." His brow furrowed at her tone. "Is something else the matter, Felicity? You seem distant." Do I? She stared out the window at the passing street lamps. How observant of you. Nathaniel fell silent, clearly sensing her mood, but uncertain of its cause. When they arrived home, he escorted her to her chambers, hesitating at the door. "Shall I stay with you tonight?" he asked, his voice gentle. "I think not," she replied, unable to bear the thought of his touch while such doubts plagued her. "The headache, you understand." Hurt flashed in his eyes, but he nodded. "Of course. Send Martha for me if you need anything." Alone, Felicity paced her chamber like a caged animal, the overheard conversation replaying in her mind. Could it be mere gossip, the kind that circulated through drawing rooms like poisoned air? Or was there truth to it, a truth Nathaniel had concealed even as he promised honesty between them? She had been a fool to believe their arrangement could transform into something genuine. A man forced into marriage by scandal and paternal decree could never truly love the woman who represented his punishment. Sleep eluded her that night, and the following morning she pleaded illness to avoid breakfast with Nathaniel and his father. By midday, however, she could no longer hide in her chambers. Steeling herself, she made her way to the Duke's study, where she knew both men would be reviewing correspondence. The footman announced her, and she entered to find Nathaniel bent over a desk while the Duke stood by the window, a letter in hand. "Felicity," Nathaniel said, rising immediately. "Are you feeling better?" "Somewhat," she replied, her gaze shifting between father and son. "I hope I'm not interrupting important business." "Nothing that cannot wait," the Duke said with uncharacteristic kindness. "Please join us." Nathaniel was just sharing news of the improvements at the manor. She took a seat, her back straight, her hands folded in her lap, the perfect duchess in form if not in spirit. "Actually, Your Grace, I was hoping to ask you something of a personal nature." The Duke raised an eyebrow. "Indeed." "Yes," she drew a steadying breath. "I wondered if you might enlighten me about the circumstances that led to my marriage to your son." A heavy silence fell over the room. Nathaniel had gone very still, his eyes fixed on her face. "I believe you are already aware of those circumstances," the Duke replied carefully. "Your father's financial difficulties made a good match imperative." "Yes, that part is clear enough." Felicity's voice remained calm, belying the storm within. "What I'm curious about is why Lord Nathaniel chose me specifically. Was it perhaps related to a certain indiscretion involving an opera singer?" The color drained from Nathaniel's face. "Felicity, I see from your expression that the rumors have some foundation," she cut in, unable to bear hearing another lie from his lips. "How interesting that this detail was omitted from your account of our arrangement." The Duke cleared his throat. "I believe this is a matter best discussed between husband and wife, if you'll excuse me." He departed, closing the door firmly behind him, leaving Felicity alone with the man she had begun to love, the man who had deceived her. "Where did you hear this?" Nathaniel asked, his voice strained. "Does it matter? Is it true?" Her composure was cracking, her voice rising despite her efforts to remain dignified. "Was our marriage your father's punishment for some sordid affair?" Nathaniel ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration she had come to know well. "It's not that simple." "Explain it to me, then," she demanded. "Make me understand how you could speak of honesty and trust while concealing something so fundamental to our union." He sank into a chair opposite her, his expression tormented. "There was an opera singer, Madame Rossini. But it was not what you think." "What I think," Felicity said, each word precise and cutting, "is that you were forced to end your relationship with her and marry me instead. That I was chosen not because you were intrigued by me, but because I represented a suitable punishment for your transgressions." "No," he said forcefully, "that is not true. Madame Rossini was a friend, nothing more." "A friend," skepticism dripped from her tone. "One whose companionship scandalized your father enough to force you into marriage." Yes, Nathaniel insisted. She was teaching me to sing, privately, as I didn't wish to be the subject of ridicule for pursuing such an interest. My father discovered our meetings and assumed the worst. The explanation was so unexpected that Felicity could only stare at him. You expect me to believe your great scandal was voice lessons. Voice lessons with an unmarried woman of questionable reputation, he clarified. In society's eyes, and certainly in my father's, that was damning enough. But surely you could have explained. To a man who believes appearances are everything, Nathaniel's laugh was bitter. He refused to hear my explanations, declared that if I wished to behave like a common libertine, he would see me settled in marriage immediately. Felicity processed this information, trying to reconcile it with what she had overheard. So when you approached my father, it was indeed my choice, Nathaniel confirmed. If I had to marry to appease my father, I was determined to choose my own bride. I had met you briefly at Lady Harrington's musicale the previous season and was struck by your composure, your quiet dignity. When I learned of your family's difficulties, I saw an opportunity for us both. And the opera singer, Felicity pressed, what became of her? She returned to Italy when the season ended. There was never anything romantic between us, Felicity. I swear it on my honor. She studied his face, searching for signs of deception and finding none, yet doubt still lingered. Why didn't you tell me this before? When you confessed to arranging our marriage. Nathaniel's shoulders sagged. Pride, I suppose. It seemed a foolish thing to have caused such upheaval in our lives, and I feared you might not believe me, that you would think exactly what you thought when you heard the rumors. The truth of his words struck her. Without witnessing his reaction, hearing the earnestness in his voice, would she have believed such a story, or would she have dismissed it as a convenient fabrication? I don't know what to believe anymore, she admitted, her anger giving way to weariness. Every time I think I understand our situation, some new revelation appears. Nathaniel moved to kneel before her, taking her hands in his. Believe this, if nothing else. Whatever began our marriage, what exists between us now is real. My feelings for you are genuine, Felicity. I love you, not out of duty or obligation, but because of who you are. She wanted desperately to believe him. The weeks at Sunderland Manor had shown her a life she had never dared hope for, a partnership of minds and hearts, respect that deepened into affection, desire tempered with tenderness. I need time, she said finally, withdrawing her hands from his. Time to think, to sort truth from gossip. Pain flickered across his features, but he nodded, rising to his feet. Of course, take all the time you need. But know that I will be here, waiting, ready to answer any questions, to prove myself worthy of your trust again. The following days were a torment of uncertainty. Felicity maintained a polite facade in public, attending required social functions at Nathaniel's side, but a chasm had opened between them. At night she retired to her own chambers, lying awake as she weighed his explanation against her fears. It was during this period of estrangement that she received an unexpected visitor, Lady Howard, her mother's oldest friend and confidant. "My dear girl," Lady Howard said, embracing Felicity warmly in the drawing-room. "How well you look as a duchess. Your mother would be so proud." "Thank you for calling, Lady Howard." Felicity gestured for tea to be served. "It's been too long since we've spoken." "Indeed." The older woman settled into a chair, her shrewd eyes taking in Felicity's appearance. "Though I must say, you seem troubled. Is married life not agreeing with you?" Something in her kind expression, so reminiscent of Felicity's mother, broke through the walls of reserve. Before she could stop herself, she was confiding the whole sorry tale, the overheard gossip, Nathaniel's explanation, her lingering doubts. Lady Howard listened without interruption, her expression thoughtful. When Felicity finally fell silent, she set down her teacup with deliberate care. "I knew your mother since we were girls at our first season," she began. "She taught me many things, but chief among them was this: judge a person by their actions, not by society's whispers. "But how can I know what's true?" Felicity asked, frustration coloring her voice. "By observing, my dear." Lady Howard's smile was gentle. "Has your husband given you cause to doubt his character in your time together? Has he been cruel, dismissive, unfaithful?" "No," Felicity admitted, "quite the opposite." "And does his explanation align with what you know of him? This concern over appearing ridiculous, this interest in music?" Felicity considered this. Nathaniel had indeed shown a passion for music, playing for her in the evenings, discussing composers with enthusiasm, even singing softly when he thought himself unobserved. And his pride was evident in many small ways, from his reluctance to dance the more frivolous country dances to his discomfort when his father criticized him publicly. "Yes," she said slowly, "it does align. Then perhaps, my dear, you should give more weight to your own experiences than to drawing-room gossip." Lady Howard reached across to pat Felicity's hand. "Marriages begin for all manner of reasons: convenience, passion, social climbing. What matters is not how they start, but how they continue." The wisdom in those words resonated with Felicity long after Lady Howard departed. That evening, as she dressed for yet another ball, she made her decision. The truth or falsity of the opera singer, rumor paled in comparison to the truth she had experienced herself. Nathaniel had been a considerate, loving husband who had given her a glimpse of happiness she had never thought possible. When they returned from the ball that night, instead of bidding him a formal good night at her chamber door, she took his hand. "Will you come in?" she asked softly. Relief and hope mingled in his expression. "Are you certain?" "I'm certain that I miss you," she said honestly. "The rest we can discuss inside." Once the door closed behind them, Felicity turned to face him. "I've been thinking about what you told me, about the opera singer, about your father's ultimatum." And his voice was carefully neutral, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. "And I believe you." The words brought a visible release of that tension. "Not because I can verify your account, but because it aligns with the man I have come to know, the man I have come to love." Felicity. Her name was a prayer on his lips as he drew her into his arms. "I was so afraid I had lost you." She rested her forehead against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "I was afraid too, afraid that everything between us had been built on falsehood." "Never that." He tilted her face up to meet his gaze. "My love for you is the truest thing I have ever known." "Then no more secrets," she said firmly. "No matter how foolish or prideful they may seem, I would rather face truth with you than live with comfortable lies." "No more secrets," he agreed, sealing the promise with a kiss that spoke of relief and renewed hope. That night, as they lay entwined in the afterglow of reconciliation, Felicity recognized a fundamental truth. Their marriage had indeed begun as an arrangement born of duty, his to his family name, hers to her impoverished family. But Nathaniel's desire for a partnership beyond mere convenience, for a love that transcended their inauspicious beginning, had changed everything. In the years that followed, as children blessed their union and Sunderland Manor rang with laughter, Felicity often reflected on the strange alchemy that had transformed their calculated alliance into something precious and genuine. The Duke, eventually won over by Felicity's grace and the obvious happiness of his son, became a doting grandfather and a more mellowed father-in-law. When Nathaniel finally succeeded to the dukedom, Felicity stood beside him not as the dutiful bride she had once been, but as a duchess in her own right, confident, beloved, and secure in the knowledge that the greatest fortune in her life had come not from titles or wealth, but from the unexpected gift of a love that had transformed them both. Their story became whispered about in drawing rooms across London, not as a scandal, but as an example of how even the most pragmatic of matches could blossom into true devotion. And though none who gossiped knew the full truth of their beginning, Felicity and Nathaniel held that knowledge between them like a shared secret, a reminder that the heart's desires, once discovered, could indeed change everything.